All right, thank you. Okay, it is 5:19, November 17th, 2021, and this is the regular meeting of the Androscoggin County Commissioners. Would you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Kelly will be here shortly, and after that, all are present. So we will start with to accept and approve the waiver of the reading of the minutes, and we actually have 2 meetings that we're going to be considering. So let's take the October 20th meeting first. Motion, please.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Poirier, motions to accept the October 20th, 2021 minutes as presented.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions about that document? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I had made a statement, I believe, at the end of the adjourning, as per the bylaws. If someone is opposed to a motion, those are supposed to be recorded, and those, I believe, were not. Thank you.
Well, we're on the 20th. We didn't adjourn on the 20th. We recessed.
States we adjourned.
We adjourned the meeting last meeting. We actually
The,
adjourned the meeting on November 3rd.
Madam Chair, it says meeting minutes October 20th. It says adjourn. Or a motion to recess, but that is still, per the bylaws, if a motion is made and a vote is held, a commissioner may state their reason for being opposed to that and asking for that to be included in the minutes.
And do you have that statement that you could give?
No, that would be on the video as required by the bylaws. I'm not required to actually submit any of that documentation. Thank you. That's only if I submit a motion.
That was the statement that was made after the recess.
It was made as part of the no vote, Madam Chair, which means it would be fully required to be included in the minutes. Thank you.
Any objection to that being?
No, I have no objections to that being added to
All
the
right.
minutes.
All those in
Research.
favor of the minutes as, I guess that would be amended. Amended, yes. In favor of the minutes as amended? Okay, opposed? Okay. Just the 4. All right, November 3rd meeting. A motion as to the November 3rd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion about the November 3rd meeting? All those in favor of accepting the November 3rd meeting as printed? Opposed?
Chair, I respectfully abstain. I was not present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, review and approval of all warrants. Motion, please.
Motion to accept all warrants as listed, 2140, 2141, 2142, 2143, 2215J, 2216J, 2217J, 2218J.
And a second? Any discussion? And this would be just the warrants, not the treasurer's report. I think it came to us together, but this, right now we'll just take the warrants. All those in favor? Opposed? At this time, there was a request that the Museum LA presentation come before our reports. Is there any objection to that? The museum LA has a presentation, and there was a request that they make their presentation now before the reports.
Objection. I would request it be voted on. Thank you.
All right, are all those in favor of allowing Museum LA to give their presentation at this time? Opposed? Okay, all right, thank you. Come right ahead, introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Thanks for having us here. I'm Rachel Ferrante. I'm the Executive Director of Museum LA. This is Tracy Gears, the Director of Development. I began at Museum LA in September. I went to Bates College, having spent most of the past decade working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I've moved back here to raise my family, and I took on this role specifically to create this new museum because of what I believe it can do for this region. Tonight I want to walk you through how museums in general are economic engines, then how this new museum is integral to Androscoggin County, and then lastly show you how we're going to achieve our capital campaign. About the new museum, we really believe that it will be an icon of regional industry and heritage. Our current space in the Bates Mill is temporary. In case any of you haven't visited us recently, a situation that was once problematic is now urgent. The mill is literally being redeveloped around us, and we must make our new home a reality. The new building, as we have identified it, is the Camden Yards Mill, which we own. The designs call for the building to be approximately 32,000 square feet, which will include a permanent exhibition space, temporary gallery space, event and education areas, classrooms, climate-controlled storage, a restaurant, and administrative offices. We believe that the new museum will present the unique treasures and stories of the region in a fitting, visually impactful, high-quality setting. I say the new museum here briefly just to tell you that a rebrand is really going to be a part of this process in order to create the museum as a destination and cultural landmark for the region as a whole, not just the Lewiston-Auburn area. That rebrand will include a name change, a new brand identity, and a brand engagement that will broaden the museum's appeal and speak to diverse audiences. I wanted to make sure that all of the commissioners had seen some of the beautiful renderings that Tom Platts has worked with us on. So you'll see some of the outside views that we've put together in conceptual design, as well as some internal views as you flip through the slides. And it's a little small, but also our current thinking, which is of course just in conceptual form, but of the first floor plans, which you can see, show you some of the spaces I talked about earlier. And we know that this can be done because there are vibrant examples of museums as icons of regions and heritage. We have successful examples such as the Mill City Museum in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Senator John Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh, and the Museum of Industrial Heritage in Italy. These are spaces that are really capturing shared heritage and explaining the forceful play on emergence from industry decline. Tell you a bit about, and Tracy's going to dig into more, how museums specifically are economic engines.
Great, thanks, Rachel. I just wanted to spend a few minutes at this point talking about the impact that the museum can have on the region. And we look at that in three ways. The first is to really look at the impact of museum jobs and expenditures directly on the communities. Tourism impacts, and then also business impacts. So there's been a lot of research done that looks at the spending that happens from museums, just paying their staff and buying things in the community. there's a 3.2 multiplier on direct museum expenditures as it relates to then the continued impact in the community, and that every direct museum job supports one additional job in the community, and also that museums have a tax impact that is multiplied by 5. So you, especially here in Maine, we can see the museum helping to generate additional economic activity, and that impact going through sales taxes and coming back to the area in revenue sharing. The tourism impacts are also really important to consider here. As we all know, there are about 9 million people that come to Maine every year. They drive to Acadia, they drive to Moosehead, they drive to many other places, and they drive right by the Lewiston Auburn area and Androscoggin County. The museum is an icon and as a very visible, high quality representation of the heritage of the area will become that attraction that will cause people to stop. And each of those folks, if they stay one night, they spend $785 per day. So that's families coming in, they need a place to eat, they need a place to stay, they're looking for other things to do, and they will spend time in the area, explore and learn more, and really get a great taste of Androscoggin County. And then finally, business impacts. Here it also is well researched that companies that are looking for places to locate are looking specifically for the concentration of museums and other cultural entities for their employees. People want to have places to take their families and to enjoy while they're here. So, for example, here we look at Bloomberg Business, Money Magazine. They incorporate that statistic of the concentration of museums in their calculations of the best places to go. So that again, when you think about Androscoggin County generally, that speaks a lot to the follow-on impacts of the new museum. I'll hand it back to Rachel.
So then specifically, we believe that this new museum will be integral to Androscoggin County's development. Exactly how we believe that the county benefits are strengthening the county image and resources by associating the region with an iconic cultural institution and a distinctive building that highlights the county's assets, attracting quality businesses to create good employment opportunities, as Tracy mentioned. So the museum could appeal directly to those businesses seeking to locate in places with strong cultural assets. And lastly, placing a true value on the historic, cultural, and artistic assets, assuring that those assets are preserved and featured to tell the story of the region. We believe that the new museum will be an economic engine for the region and Androscoggin county-wide benefits, not just for the We've spent $1.5 million to date in environmental cleanup and stabilization on the site. We estimate that it's going to cost us approximately $15 million in construction and materials to create this museum, with an estimated $1.3 million annually in direct impact on the region from our operations, and then of course additional indirect tourism and business impacts. Based on the current plans for the construction and operations of the museum, the construction phase will employ local contractors and workers, creating jobs in the region, and the operations phase will include a destination marketing strategy forecasted to bring 15,000 new visitors annually, generating additional spending in the community. The regional impacts for events and ongoing community engagement, such as school group visits and seasonal events, again across the region, and the ability to showcase the museum and its benefits to prospective businesses and residents. So clearly, the return on investment for the county is strong. So with that, with the vision in place, the time is now to raise the money. We're ready, the building's acquired, architectural plans are in place, and the community is eager for this to happen. Now to move forward, we need to raise the money. We're sharing that load across government, institutional, and private sources, and we hope we can count on your support. Thank you. We're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Questions? Go ahead.
You shared with me earlier that you made a presentation with the City of Auburn yesterday, and you've also spoken to the City of Lewiston. Perhaps you could share that with the group.
Yeah, so actually Mayor Levesque was here and he heard our presentation along with the Auburn City Council last night, and we are hopeful that they will be supportive. There were a number of very positive comments at
Madam Chair,
Go right ahead.
have you made a request to Wales, Sabattis, and Lisbon, the smaller towns? Okay. I would just point out if you're asking for county funds, it would be probably appropriate because I'm representing those towns. And I want to make sure it's not just the big cities getting asked because what happens is they ask the big cities, oh, it's the big city supports it, but the towns don't get checked, but we're still taxing out the little towns as well. Thank you.
I'm happy to ask any and everyone that would like to be asked. We certainly started with Lewiston and Auburn primarily because that's where the museum is based, but certainly our asks extend to Barnes.
Madam Chair.
Go right ahead.
I guess maybe an extension of that question from Commissioner Larry is the LA Museum, we understand what that implies, is the presence of museum items or other areas of the county, or what are your plans? What do you do right now, for instance, as far as territory that you consider included?
Well, our hope is that, well, at the moment, for example, we have a travel trunk program for school groups, and that's not just for schools in the Lewiston-Auburn region, but for basically anyone that can come and drive to our location and pick up this travel trunk. It's been enormously popular as school groups have been unable to take field trips and visit the museum in person. We're trying to deliver educational programming and meet people and kids and teachers where they are. So I would say the same thing can then be extrapolated to the new museum, which is we want to both make sure everybody from the region feels welcome, and that also we are similarly touching all of those people and providing resources for them, both in the museum itself and also virtually online and as far away as we can. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. I mean, if there's something interesting from one of the small towns, might that be on display in the museum?
Absolutely, if it fits within the museum's collection, and I think the museum's collection is, at the moment, extends beyond just the Lewiston-Auburn region. Certainly, the community members that started the museum started in one general area, but I know collecting has extended far beyond that, and it will continue to do so.
Thanks.
Yes, go right ahead.
Excuse me. I need to just declare that I am on the board of Museum LA, but it doesn't prevent me from contributing and voting on this issue because I am not benefiting personally, financially about this. How is your program going to, or do you have plans in the program to collaborate with other smaller museums in the county and historical societies?
So we have a partnership that is ongoing with the Anscombe Historical Society, and we would like to, we have partnerships with Bates College, and I'm certainly, as being new here, trying to reach out and forge new partnerships and strengthen the existing partnerships that the museum has. I think that the way we will be most effective is sort of all working together to touch as many people in the community as possible. So, whether that be through ACLA, our partnership with the Anscombe Historical Society, our communications with Bates College, or other organizations that we are not yet, in touch with, but absolutely should be. I think all of those things need to be part of our strategy.
And so you're counting on all of this capital campaign strategy to make the whole project viable. And if you don't have all of these committed, that would make the project quite detrimental as far as funding and actual realization.
Absolutely, yeah. As I say, the mill is literally being redeveloped. They are tearing up the floor and putting up walls around us. So it's only a matter of time before the museum is without a home. And so we need to raise these funds, and without these funds, it's not possible.
I failed to, I am also on the board of Museum LA, but I have no financial gain either. But I'm also belong to other organizations as a volunteer, so we'll front stuff.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. I mean, your building is just spectacular. It's a beautiful addition to LA for sure. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move forward. Thank you so much.
Can I just ask about
Sure.
what the work process is? So we've understood from Auburn and Lewiston what their processes are for hearing these proposals and then making decisions and their timelines and such. Does Androscoggin County have a plan for that?
To my knowledge, the board has not set forth a timeline to when the decisions are being made. We have a few items that are priority items, and then right now we're in the process of hearing presentations and, going from that. Anyone else have something they want to add to that?
Yeah, there's another organization making a presentation on December 3rd. Thursday, whatever, Wednesday. And so I think that by then we'll have a better idea of how funds will be allocated. And there'll be discussion among us. It's up to us to make a motion. And certainly that I feel, and we feel that we're not quite ready to have that discussion tonight. But I'm sure that we won't let this hang, because there's a demand and other things that are needed to be discussed with other organizations. So I can't tell you more than that.
That's helpful.
All right.
Thank
For
you.
taking your time to come in though personally and explaining it to us, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I see that Rosie Boyce is here from the Journey House, and she's listed under new business as well. It might be nice to have her speak at least before the budget discussion. I don't know how long the budget discussion is
We
going to
can
go.
take, if there's, I guess we'll take a quick vote. If there's no, it's up to the board, would you like to go ahead and take Journey House presentation now also? All those in favor? Opposed?
No.
Journey House,
I've got
love
some
to hear from you.
You do?
Appreciate you being flexible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I became aware a few months ago that there was a recovery house in Auburn, which I didn't know about. And come to find out, it's only been there for a little while. And as you know, that's a challenge for communities our size and more. And the folks I ran into there seemed pretty nice and conscientious. And I'd met someone that was a resident there. She's moved on. And so when we saw that there was some tri-county mental request last week, as I mentioned at last meeting, I thought we'd let Rosie's folks come in and make a presentation. I know that there's a house in Lewiston called the Oak House. They got some state funds. The Journey House in Auburn got going a little later. They didn't get any state funds. They're like about a year behind on the rent, things like that. So I'm hoping that we can maybe do something to help keep them going.
Ms.
Interesting.
Boyce, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you guys taking a few moments to hear from us. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Rosie Boyce. I'm the program director for Journey House Recovery for our Auburn Women's Program. I am a woman in recovery, 13 years clean sober from my heroin addiction. I'm a formerly incarcerated person. And I also serve on the training committee for MAR, the Maine Association of Recovery Residences, and I'm an organizer with the Maine Recovery Advocacy Project. I guess what I'll say before I turn to this, the proposal that John just handed out, is that sober living is, for me, when I was on my journey in early recovery, sober living was a vital piece of the foundation for me to learn how to reintegrate back into society. Sober living is not just for myself, but for many of the women that have come through the house, serve as not only a launching pad or a stepping stone, but it also serves as a great deterrent for the recidivism rate, not just for the county, but for the entire state. I work very closely with Drug Court, with the DOC, with the federal BOP, main pretrial and probation. And I work with a couple of the case managers that work within Androscoggin County Jail as well. We have currently at Journey House with our we have 6 beds for women. I have the only 6 recovery beds for women in Androscoggin County, really in central Maine. But, so the waiting list is a mile long. I mean, really, ideally, there are no services hardly at all in the state for women, let alone for women with children. We don't house children at this program, but it is my hope that someday soon we'll be able to expand to a larger house and potentially look at housing mothers and children. The family is a vital piece of recovery as well. So this proposal that you have in front of you, the front piece is just a breakdown of what we like to ask for. Our men's house is in Lewiston. There are also 6 beds for men through Journey House there. There are, between other recovery residences that have opened up, they're all men's houses. There are a couple other entities that combined have about 40 beds for men. Journey House has 6 of those 40 beds. The other beds are all through another agency. But for women, our house is the only thing that's available locally. So on the back here it says Journey House Recovery is a Maine-based 501c3 nonprofit community organization that operates recovery residences, which are safe, supportive, and sober homes where survivors of substance use disorder can live for significant periods of time and at present, Journey House Recovery operates 5 houses across Sanford, South Portland, Lewiston, and Auburn, and employs 6 part-time staff members, 1 per house, and an executive director. In-depth financial and operating details are available upon request. Unlike many other recovery residences, which often charge high prices, the vast majority of Journey House's residences are very low income and pay on a sliding scale, with no one being turned away for lack of funds. Journey House's programs are truly pluralistic, welcoming residents with many different faiths and approaches to recovery, and the programs all actively collaborate with a variety of clinical, legal, and peer-based supports in the surrounding community, including medical programs offering medication-assisted treatment. Journey House is also dedicated to developing leadership skills among residents, and at present, all 6 staff members are survivors of both substance use disorder and incarceration. In Androscoggin County specifically, Journey House operates 2 programs, a 6-bed men's house in Lewiston and a 6-bed women's house in Auburn. The Lewiston program launched in 2018 and was one of the first programs in the state to secure a significant operating grant from the Maine State Housing Authority that was called the Recovery Residence Pilot Program, which covers most of the house's rent, utilities, and staffing. The Auburn program, which is my program, which is the only program of its kind in Androscoggin County, offering a safe and sober long-term home to low-income women in recovery, opened in October of 2020 and does not have the Maine State Housing Authority's operating grant, relying instead on community fundraising, charitable contributions, and the generosity of its staff. We are requesting assistance for Lewiston. $3,000 will cover all of the costs of hosting a 5-day training in the Lewiston-Auburn area for 20 students, including both residents of both of our houses and community members. Participants will learn the basics of how to support people in early recovery, preparing for both volunteer and paid positions. We would also like financial assistance in assembling a bookshelf of clinical, psychological, and spiritual recovery books for residents to read, as well as $100 to train one of our house leaders in Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery is another peer-based recovery program, much like Narcotics Anonymous or NA. For our Auburn house, while the Lewiston program has secured an operating grant from the Maine State Housing Authority to cover its rent and utilities, our Auburn program does not have an operating grant yet. This has left Journey House in the difficult position of needing to sustain the program with revenues from elsewhere, which are in short supply. As a result, the program has fallen significantly behind on rent and has an outstanding water bill. $6,500 would enable us to remain current on rent and utilities through the end of 2021. And on the front, you can also see that we broke down just for the water bill, supplies for the women. We do get a lot of donations, thankfully, for things like toilet paper and women's hygiene products, but we still fall short. And more often than not, I come out of my own pocket to cover things like that when they're not available from elsewhere. With that being said, I heard the LA Museum during their pitch say, they said, how does this benefit the county, right? And so it put a light bulb off in my head about how does having a sober living, right, a recovery residence in Androscoggin County benefit the county specifically. I don't think that there's probably anyone in this room that is a stranger to the opioid epidemic that we're facing. At one time, it was this thing that was very far removed from most people, right? It was a thing that was swept under the rug. At this point, it's kind of like the 7 degrees or the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? But it's more like 1 or 2 degrees. There isn't anybody in this room, I don't think, that either has not been impacted directly or knows someone that has been impacted directly, whether it's through their own self or a child, a loved one. We are looking at substantial and significant overdose deaths right in this city and right across the bridge in Lewiston every day. Last Wednesday, a week ago from today, there were 7 overdose deaths on Bartlett Street alone in Lewiston. That is 2 streets up from our men's sober living house. And unfortunately, as much as we try to combat this problem, right, there is always, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to get rid of the dealers, right? Like the war on drugs has been has had a bigger impact in the negative than in the positive. The one thing that we can do though is take away the customers, right? By offering them a safe, stable place to live first, and then slowly reintegrating people back into society after they get a little bit of sober time under their belt is imperative. I don't believe that I would have 13 years clean and sober standing here today if I hadn't spent 9 months in sober living myself back in 2008 when I first got clean and sober. And I don't, I guess I'm gonna ask you guys if you have any specific questions.
Before we take questions, I just want to congratulate you first on 13 years of sober. That's wonderful. And then the way that you're giving back. And many times I'm sure it's a thankless and discouraging job, but trying to make a difference with other people too. It's a wonderful thing you're doing. Questions?
Madam Chair, do your residents, if I can call them residents, are they referred to you? How do they find you?
So it happens through a variety of avenues. A lot of it is word of mouth, right? Other either providers in the community, like drug court, probation, Maine pretrial. If they have whether it's a probationer or an inmate, or someone just out on bail, that they know if they release them out onto the streets, that they'll, one, likely die, but two wind up reincarcerated within a matter of days. A lot of times they will, like Olivia Brown or Nicole Gagnon from probation, Orion, Ryan's last name is escaping me, but he is with me. Pretrial services, they'll call, ask if I have an open bed. Unfortunately, more often than not, I don't, because I have the only 6 beds. I have a wait list a mile long. There are 2 women currently sitting at the Women's Reentry Center in Wyndham. They could be out on home confinement, but there is nowhere for them to go. They're waiting until I have a bed opening. So we have a website where people can, you can Google search, sober living in Maine, and we pop up at the top there. But we're also listed on the Maine Association of Recovery Residences website. But
So you have 100% occupancy all the time, both in the men's and the women's facility. And what's the average stay of your people?
it depends on the person, of course. 'Cause, sometimes we have someone that comes in. And the thing about recovery and sobriety is if someone isn't ready, they're not going to get it. Like if someone's being forced into the bed, right, then, like say probation or drug court. So I would say probably 30% of the women that come into the house are there for a week or less, and then they either get rearrested or they take off and then whatever. But the average stay is 9 months to a year for someone that is doing well, and that gives them time to get a job, save some money, get their mental health and substance use disorder into some kind of manageable state, and then hopefully the ideal situation is that they will transition into a place of their own after they've saved a little bit of money. I'm sure that you're all aware that we are in the middle of a horrible housing crisis, so that has added an additional challenge to trying to transition women out of the house and the men. But yeah, that's.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
How is the whole COVID lockdowns, how has that affected the number of people you see? Obviously, you're limited, and I appreciate the work you do, and thank you for doing that for these folks. I'm sure it's a challenge. Have you seen a big increase? I know this is sort of a newer setup, but my guess is probably you've been involved with this for a few years. Have you seen a big change?
Absolutely. COVID impacted the recovery community at large significantly, especially the 12-step programs like AA and NA, where meetings were shut down, everything was shut down. One of the biggest meetings in Lewiston, Auburn takes place at Calvary. Well, it used to take place at Calvary Church. And on Tuesday and Thursday nights, we were seeing upwards of 70 to 80 people a night at the meeting. Since COVID hit, the numbers, because I also run a couple, recovery meetings in the community as well. Numbers really haven't surpassed 30 to 40 people. That's like, but when we were able to first reopen, we were getting 6 or 8 people at a time at the meetings. We lost a number of some of our core recovery community members during the pandemic to overdose death, which was, it's a devastating blow because, you come to care about people personally within the recovery community. They become your family. And as far as the house goes, our house wasn't open during the height of the pandemic from like March of 2020 onward. We opened in October after the initial lockdowns had seceded. So the women at my house have thankfully been able to go to in-person meetings and engage in other community activities in person. Our men's house, though, was open during that time, and our other houses in Cumberland County. And during the initial phase of the lockdown, we experienced some people that wanted to run, right? Because it's scary, right? Especially in early recovery, like everything. People coming into early recovery, their brain has survived on survival mode for such a long time that basic menial or seemingly menial tasks become very overwhelming. And so it's, again, I guess that points back to the necessity of sober living, right? Like just loading the dishwasher or doing a load of laundry those are normal everyday things for like people like us, right, sitting here today. But especially someone that's been incarcerated for a significant amount of time or has experienced homelessness for a significant amount of time, there is a very significant amount of damage that's done to the brain, physical damage, that I don't think we talk enough about. Trauma causes damage to the brain. And so when the lockdown happened, there was that initial like shell shock of like, oh, we can't leave, we can't go to meetings, we can't do anything. And, like there was a PTSD response that rippled throughout not just our houses, but through all the houses. And unfortunately, we did lose some people both to relapse and overdose death. But one of the blessings that has come out of the pandemic is hybrid, right? Zoom. It's once we got our feet back under us, I'm talking we as in the recovery community, being able to connect with other people through Zoom in a way that like, I can go to a meeting in Ireland, right, through Zoom. I can hit a meeting in Las Vegas, right, when I leave here tonight. Like that's if I want to, you know, like, and that has been, once we got Zoom established and we were able to implement that into the houses, things smoothed out a little bit. The passing of like the telehealth bills to allow people to still connect with providers was a huge milestone too, as far as that goes. But yeah, we've definitely, the recovery community at large has definitely had a little bit of a hurdle to get over through the pandemic, but I think we're on the upward swing of that now.
Speaking of health, because I saw it mentions medical, do you provide any referrals to other health services at all?
Yeah, yep.
And do you provide any referrals to like Maine Family Planning, Planned Parenthood, abortion referrals, anything like that?
So, not necessarily abortion referrals. I would not say that that is something, but for the women in my house, I do strongly suggest that they're all on some form of birth control. They have to have a primary care provider and a mental health counselor and a substance abuse counselor. They have a month probationary period when they first come into the house to get those things set up. You know, I sit with the girls like when I have a new intake and go through those things and help them fill out like applications if need be, or to make phone calls, because again, those things can be very overwhelming to someone that's.
Yes, go ahead.
This would probably be a one-time donation because we have available funds from government. And you said that this would take care of your utility bill and what have you for the end of 2021. Well, what happens in 2022? Do you have plans to get more revenue, or?
Yeah. So we are hoping that the Maine State Housing Authority's pilot program will relaunch. It has, because they've been handling the COVID rent relief piece, that has pushed everything else to the wayside. They're so overwhelmed with the number of applications that they've received from everyone. Because my house is not funded by the Maine State Housing Authority's grant, we do qualify for the COVID rent relief. So that has not come in yet, but we're hoping that by the end of the year that will come through. We also, certain residents qualify for general assistance through the city, but that trickles in, you know, that is, it depends on who's there, you know, at the house if they qualify. But we hope that by 2022, by the start of the year, it was supposed to be in July and then again in October, that the Recovery Residence Pilot Program was relaunching for the 2021 year, but that has not happened yet. But we have like an MUA from Maine State Housing Authority that it will continue. They just don't know when. Right now, they can't give us a specific date, and my house is in line to be brought on with the other Journey houses to receive funding. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for the work that you do. My primary occupation is in the mental health, within the mental health community. And I see on a daily basis what kind of an impact services like you provide have on the people that they help. So thank you. You mentioned other forms of revenue. What does that look like for you, like on a monthly basis? What do you rely on to pay your bills?
So some of that is, like I said, like donations from the community, but that usually comes in the form of like items, right? Like people donate women's clothing, tampons, pads, toilet paper. But we have general assistance, right, that comes through when a resident qualifies. And people are able to, sometimes if they're coming out of prison, there's like a 2-month DOC stipend that will come with them. There's the Bridging the Grant opportunity that people from Maine pretrial have access to. And then there's, the name of it is Operation Hope, right, through the Scarborough Police Department. If they refer someone to the house, sometimes they will come with 2 or 3 months of rent paid. So that's what, like I said, it's very, very rare that that a person comes in with the ability to pay their rent every month, right? But usually I like to see someone working, whether it be part-time or full-time, doing something to get their feet underneath them by the end of the 2nd month at the house. And from there forward, the idea is that they, start paying the rent. But with the pandemic, employment has been tricksy too. So it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to open the house, get it up, running, and to sustain it. But we're making it work. And our landlord, he owns 4 of the 5 Journey houses across the state of Maine. He's also the owner-operator of Courage House in Gorham, which is a 20-bed men's house. And because he owns the property, I do not want to lose sight of the fact that we are open, only by his grace at this point, right? Because any other landlord, if you haven't paid your rent, right? So not the residents paying the rent, but Journey House paying its rent to the property owner, we would have been evicted, right, if we were a regular tenant. But because Rob is a person in long-term recovery himself, and he understands the importance of the work that we do, he was willing to, to kind of take the hit, so to speak, to get the women's house off the ground, because he also recognizes how sorely needed it is, not just in this area, but all across the state. So,
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. And we have your contact information here, if there's other questions.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rosie. Great job.
Rosie.
Okay, was there an MCCA meeting in the last 2 weeks?
It was an MCCA meeting, but I don't have a report for tonight. So
Okay.
I'll get the next one.
Central Maine Workforce Board, Commissioner Kelly.
Let's see. Ms. Flanders, thank you for coming again this evening. Is there anything that you might like to share with us? I do have the email that you sent me, but I haven't had a chance to pull it up. And hey, wonderful. That would be wonderful. Wonderful if you are prepared to do it.
Sure, of course. So good afternoon, good evening, commissioners. My name's Blaine Flanders. I spoke
Last meeting.
Thank you for having me back again. So I just, I started sending this report over, and really what this touches on is the enrollment numbers by county. And so I'm sorry I don't have copies for all of you, but I can give you the printed copy. And so what we're looking at in Androscoggin County for this program year, which starts in July 1st of this year, we have 93 enrollments, and this is a unique count for NEOA funding, for COVID-19 National Dislocated Worker Grant, and the Opioid National Dislocated Worker Grant. And so far in Androscoggin County, we have 93 people that have been enrolled through EMDC, Enrollment Corporation, and CCI, Canadian Concepts, Inc., that are subcontracted with the board. And so looking at our numbers from program year 2020, they were able to serve 128 people. And so that ran from July 1st of 2020 to June 30th of 2021. Again, 128 people for Androscoggin County. We're already at 93 for this program year, and so we're already seeing that exponential growth. We've been developing new programs, EMDC's been hiring new folks, and again, we've had an extension for another year for the Opioid National Dislocated Worker Grant until the end of the calendar year of 2022. And so we're able to utilize those funds for another calendar year. And back again, looking at 2019 program year, we have 78. And so we have a lot of growth going on in the county, and so we're hoping to see those numbers continue to rise. These numbers were as of November 2nd. So, I have a couple other things in here, really just on where we're staffing in the county, and as well as what our community involvement looks like. But we also have we have 2 training projects going on right now. One is for personal support specialist out of Turner, and then we also have a certified medical assisting program training, and that is out of Lewiston. And so those are our current in progress training programs. So. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Absolutely. Thank you. I can make copies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
I just had a question. Ma'am, do you see a large increase in the demand for the certified medical assistants at this point?
We have seen an uptick in our, you can call them priority industries that we're trying to focus on right now, which is manufacturing, IT, and healthcare. We do see an increase that we're trying to work on, not just in Androscoggin County, but in the 5 counties that we serve, is that we're trying to implement some sort of schedule, so that way we're not duplicating different training programs. Like you'll have a CNA program over here and a CNA program in another county, and duplicating those efforts, you get a low enrollment number for training. So by having some sort of schedule, the enrollment numbers are higher, and we see greater success. And this allows like CMMC, right? If they're going to host a training program, they would have higher enrollment numbers. And so we do see an uptick for sure.
Is it CNA or C?
There's 2 different. There's CNA and CMA.
Okay, I wanted to verify that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my concern is with Governor Mills's vaccine mandate and their actions, that has contributed unnecessarily to that whole need where your services would be used elsewhere to help some of the other workplace shortages that we're experiencing as a state. So.
Of course, yeah, we haven't seen any change due to that yet, but we'd probably be able to tell. A lot of our training programs, they run, over a course of anywhere from like a month to 6 months to 9 months, and so right now we haven't seen a change, but that could be something that we see in the next 6 months or so. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Linda. Okay, treasurer's report. Hi, Chris.
statements for October 31st. Everything's looking pretty good. We've paid off the TAN. Be, as a side note, bringing the documents for the next year, I believe, to the next meeting. It's a sign for the TAN. Revenues, deeds revenue continue to be over budget, looking really good. Probate is looking good. Civil's still lagging behind. And expenses are right on track. Human resources, as I said in my note here, that they're slightly over by $96. And that's an area where really it's hard to tell. It depends on how many new hires we have, because that's where we charge all the pre-employment exams and stuff like that. So sometimes if we have a lot of new hires, that line goes over. So. But other than that, everything's looking good.
I had several questions, but I think I'll wait till next week and reopen this up with you next week so we can get on to the budget. If anybody else had questions before we take a vote to accept the report? Okay. All in favor of accepting the treasurer's reports? Opposed?
Respectfully opposed, thank you.
Administrator's report?
Okay, just very quickly, the jail audit has been finalized, and we will have copies before you at the next meeting. The ARPA projects are moving forward. The Treasurer's Office is working on their new software installation. Roofing projects are moving. As we've seen, we're scheduling presentations to the commissioners and so on. I think they've started they're starting to work toward the HVAC system and so on. I reviewed again the 2022 budget, and the only real new information that I have is that, as Clarice just mentioned, and there are some other areas where county revenues are ahead of projections, and so it looks as though the fund balance, as you know, we was a little over $1 million. They took $380,000 from this year's, for this year's budget, which brings us down to 670 something. And it looks as though we'll be back to $1 million by year's end. So that being said, you know, we got to look at in the future, not using reserve funds to lower taxes, but it looks as though that fund balance, we're going to be much better than I had anticipated. I'm looking at doing year-end activities, preparing for 2022. I've been reading and reviewing legal correspondence regarding the opioid lawsuit. And at the next meeting, I'll bring a request for you to approve signing authority for when the thing gets finally settled. And they're anticipating that's going to be fairly soon. That's all I have at the moment.
For the administrator.
Madam Chair. I would ask through the chair to the administrator, are we at this point still holding off on enforcing the injection mandate from the Biden administration that is on pause by the courts? Some places are going forward, so it is a valid question.
I have repeatedly stated, and I will state once again, no, we are not doing anything about vaccination mandates.
Okay. Any other question for the administrator? Okay, thank you. Comments from the public. And Dave, I'm going to ask that you check online. Okay. Forward to adopting the 2022 budget. Last week there were some questions, and so in respect of the commissioners that still had some questions to be answered, we tabled it until this meeting. I do not believe if we did, I didn't write it down, that we had a motion or a second. I think we just picked it right up and, just with a presentation and then started. Is that what your notes also reflected? that that's where we are. We just sort of, we
Yeah,
picked it
yeah,
up after the presentation. Okay, so, no objection, let's go ahead and take a motion and a second to, and then we'll open it up for discussion to adopt the 2022 budget as sent to us from the Budget Committee. Motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Okay. Who would like to go first, the discussion?
Thank you. Mr. Post, trying to understand here, I see with overlay and without overlay. Understand that. I think I've answered my own question. It's 2021. Now that makes sense. I was trying to understand how that without overlay would be higher, but that's fine. Never mind. My apologies. Thank you.
Commissioners that had questions last week and wanted to, did you get those addressed or answered, or are we still?
Well, I had prior to the meeting, but tonight, I guess, Larry is bringing up some new numbers as far as the income numbers. So, my concern a couple of weeks ago was the fact that the Androscoggin County Unassigned Fund, over the 10 years, we've grown at about approximately $1 million, and it took us 10 years to get there. Last year, we dipped into we took 36% of that money and used it to balance the budget. And I understand, at that time, I was sitting out in the audience as a member of the public, and it was my first time that I ever attended a budget committee meeting. And I saw the commissioners struggling with trying to take in all the economic disruptions that were happening and work very hard to get that number down. I think, if I remember correctly, also, after they got it down, then the budget committee took it and brought up some of the numbers. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So, so you guys had a very good discussion last year, somewhat lengthy, or at least sitting out in the audience, I thought it was somewhat lengthy, maybe. But in any case, you made a good decision to look at your rainy day fund and say, we need to use that money. This is what the idea is of a rainy day fund. The roof leaks, the economy tanks. We step up. We try to help our communities because it's Androscoggin County. It's the county, we work with everyone. This year, my concern was we were again dipping into that rainy day fund to the tune of another 29%, reducing it by another 200,000. So here we were 2 years, and we were literally wiping out what we built in 10 years, into 50% of it in a matter of 2 years. I mean, the great news is we had it to do what we needed to do. The unfortunate news is that we're looking to do this, and I just don't think we should be going there. We were fortunate in that the ARPA money has allowed us to approach some of the capital improvement. We're having the roof fixed. We're doing things that if we didn't have the ARPA money, and I know there's some people that feel that the ARPA money shouldn't be there or whatever, but I'm not going to get into the political side of it. But that money is working to maintain, to help keep this budget lower. And for us to also have to go dip into our reserves, I just look at that as a long-term strategy. Because I look at the county, having come on board here in the last year, I look at the county as an ongoing operations, And while I'm only elected till next, for another year, I don't want to leave the next person, if it's not me, in a financial situation that will make them look like the difficult, they'll have to make that difficult decision of not being able to maintain a reasonable tax increase in the future. We've seen the towns of Mechanic Falls, we've seen the town of Poland, we've seen the town of Sabattis all struggle with that recently, with expenditures that they've had to, they've gone through their town budgets, they've had to go back and request extra money. I'm assuming they had a rainy day fund. I have to admit, I don't read all the financials from every community. But that's the idea behind it, that you use it when you need that type of thing. And my concern that I raised last week was simply that knowledge that we're doing that. And the question that I asked at the time, and I know Larry went out and, Mr. Post, excuse me.
Larry's fine.
Went out and figured out that basically it's adding 1 cent, a penny pretty much for every 100,000 that we add back into the revenue stream. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I understand that correctly? So my question was just to take time to digest that. I also went back and looked at the audited report that we had from our CPA company. Back in the audit report dated December 31st, 2020, on page 11, it said the county unassigned fund balance has fallen below a level sufficient to sustain government operations for a period of approximately 1 month. So what we're saying there, or what the CPA is saying there, is we don't have enough funds to run this organization for 1 month based on our reserve position. The statement also went further to say that the county was working to build that back up. But the budget that we were looking at 2 weeks ago was not building that back up. And I feel that Mr. Post and the treasurer, when they were asked during the audit, because I know how that works, I've sat in audits, they presented truthfully what they thought the county was doing, because they were looking at 10 years experience, and they saw that fund growing on an annual basis. Some years better than others, but still, chugging away in a positive manner. So that's really my concern. Tonight, you present and as you said when you originally presented the budget, one of our challenges was the revenue reductions is really where the biggest problems were hitting our financials for 2022. Now the numbers seem to be, the economy is moving forward again. And again, knowing that the economy is moving forward, why would we use our reserves? That's my question. But I am new to the commission. I know there's, with the exception of Ed being even a more rookie than I am, you guys have been here longer than I have. You understand perhaps the working of this better than I do. I come from a different background where I wouldn't accept that in my previous career. But I'm not saying that it doesn't work. And again, I want to commend the budget committee for all the work they did. They did a wonderful job of trying to cut expenses down. When they reviewed the budget, they did look for places to, they looked at the revenue side as well as the expense side. But again, when you're looking at a $15-16 million budget, you bring in, you're given a binder with over 100 pages of information. It can be overwhelming. It's definitely a learning curve. And I know these people who get appointed to the budget committee serve a very short window. So it's very hard to study a financial statement once a year and dissect it. So I want to say thank you to them for all the work they've done. Having said that, I'll listen to what the rest of you have to say. I mean, matter of fact, I'd love to hear how you feel about the numbers that we're looking at.
Go right ahead.
I agree too that the budget committee did fine work, and it's not easy. Anything on a municipal or county level where you're dealing with public funds and you're trying to make sense of it for one thing, and then be judicious on the other side is yeoman's work. It's a lot of work, and I really appreciate the effort of the committee that went through so diligently the budget process. But what you're saying, I think, is like, if I own a company, let's say the county is a company, basically operates like a company. Accountants and treasurers would never say, "Oh, we're running short on cash, so let's sell some assets and pay our operating expenses." That's a number one rule that you should not do if you're looking at an accounting textbook. You shouldn't sell assets. You shouldn't use reserves unless it's a real good reason for ordinary operating expenses. And most of the budget is ordinary operating expenses unless we have capital projects. And so, I commiserate with what Roland has said, and we just can't keep doing this forever. We have to address the revenue stream or reduce the expense stream, not to be relied on this rainy day fund, if you want to call it. I'm not suggesting any magic potion at this point, but we need to be responsible in the future, and need to come up with a better solution than we have.
Additional comments?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I guess I just feel like it's, pardon the analogy, but sort of like trying to patch up the individual after they've been run over by a car, when we should have dealt with the drunk driver to begin with. The COVID over-response has caused so much of this. That's why we have these recovery beds filling up. That's why we have skyrocketing opioid rates. We were having issues before, but this really poured the gas on the fire, and locking people down, keeping them away from their families and friends has really had a massive impact that's costing the taxpayer. And this whole lockdown, shutdown of essential or non-essential workers has permanently changed, short of the Lord's intervention, what's going to go on in this country. And so we're trying to fix something, and I agree with you, it's a very difficult decision, but the revenues aren't going to be there because the jobs aren't there. We've heard that from other people. We've all heard about that. It's hard to find the jobs. It's hard to find the workers. And a lot of these jobs are gone, not to come back, all because of overreaction by state government and federal government. And that this is why we should have taken a stand against mask mandates, against injection mandates, and all these other things, that we did have a vested reason and interest and a justifiable legal path forward. So I would just say that's great that we're trying not to hit that rainy day fund, but these are these recurring problems that get made by government, and then they offer us some ARPA money to fix the problem and grow themselves even bigger. And it's a problem that will continue until politicians decide to be stateswomen and statesmen and stand up to the tyranny.
Okay. I mean, when I look at the budget, obviously, the revenues weren't there, the increases weren't great, but passing that budget along was something I don't think any of us relish doing. I don't like taking money from the reserves. We've enjoyed several really good audits, and that's been a plus. I think it was the sheriff that coined the term in Budget Committee of the cliff. I'm concerned about that, and I see that as a problem, and with using the ARPA funds for operating expenses is certainly a concern. My problem is, I don't have a better idea. And so for, if I don't have a better idea, I need to just get on board with what the Budget Committee has proposed, because they stuck their neck out there and they had an idea, and I don't have anything better than what they proposed. And even at those reduced numbers, we had town meeting last night, they're not even being accepted, well. There's some problems even with the reduced numbers. And so I will be voting, I will be agreeing with the Budget Committee just based on the fact that they came up with something and I can't come up with anything better. That would be one reason. And the other reason for me, and if you've been around here many years, it's a philosophical reason. I was around during the lawsuit, and long before the judge, I collected facts almost obsessively during the lawsuit, and long before the judge ever rendered a decision, I made a philosophical decision in my own heart that it didn't matter what the judge said. If the Budget Committee had the majority vote, the numbers that they needed, I was going to back that up. I believe that they were right. I was around when they presented the charters to the towns. I think they were absolutely in the right. And so, based on that reason, when they have a majority, the supermajority, I'll always back that up.
I will, the main thing to me is, and I think we need to do a much better job administratively of selling the reserve accounts, have a systematic and a much better way of putting together reserve accounts and selling them, and keeping, quite frankly, those should be, and in the future, you need to be, whether it's by policy or whatever, that reserve accounts are not touchable to reduce the budget. Therefore, expenditures for capital things that we need. That's the only big issue. And again, I'm glad to say that we'll be okay in the fund balance, even though we used way more than we should have, and we're nowhere near the $2 million that I keep saying. And yet, we're gaining ground every year instead of losing it, if you look at those, that fund balance sheet that I gave you in the budget. There's a lot of things that I wish were different, but then again, that's the way it is, and I can pull a little more magic and, do with what the Budget Committee has come up with. I can recommend that and so I'll leave it at that. I will say, though, it has been said that this is another tough budget year. And I will tell you that I have been in this profession since 1978, and I have never seen a good budget year.
So, Mr., would you like to weigh in at all? Certainly.
Sure, thank you. The fact is, I'm probably one of the other resident dinosaurs that actually been here back when the lawsuit was actually going before you. I appreciate what the commission is actually saying for a tone coming from you guys that protect the reserves. I've shared it several times, the fact that my first initiation of the Budget Advisory Committee was listening to Chairman Greenwood actually looking to raid the entire process, bring it down to zero. And the fact is, and I stormed out of that meeting at 1:15 in the morning. Mm-hmm. In fact, I quite uncoolly lost my shit, knowing that Norman Beauplan, that actually was the Budget Advisory Vice Chair at the time, would actually pick up the pieces to be able to begin recovery that's taken us 6 years to get to here. In that regard, it is a conscious decision that you guys support. This budget had its challenges. I echo what Mr. Post is actually saying in that regard, is it ideal? No. There are things in here I don't like. But what I would offer is, to your point, is it wasn't any one person. It was, we worked for the 11 votes. It is your entire communities that Androscoggin is represented here. Because if we didn't have 11 votes, it didn't come before you because it became the priority of looking at the entire basket of goods for a budget that is actually the least disruptive for this coming year. Quite specifically, because Mr. Post is again right, it's on the revenue side of things. He's listed them here, the fact that the original budget for increases on the expenditure side were only 2.16%, but 18.4% on the reduction in revenues. You gotta look at the basket of goods and be able to make some real choices that are at least disruptive to what operationally your staff need to work with. You're not investing in them, you're SOL. You got nothing. In fact, in that regard, there were some issues to hear that needed to come into play. And again, I go back 6 years ago. I stormed out of a meeting for the exact reason. You wouldn't have my name on this budget if I didn't believe it was the right thing to do. Post comes next year, and you've got not an anomaly, but you got the same issue with the budget, with the revenues not coming back. You got a real issue that need to be addressed, and he is on right. But the fact that I'm willing to at least say the fact that with what I heard from Mr. Smith at your meeting where you turned it over to us with where he's at, and questioned him last night in Lisbon's, when our audit presentation came up here. The fact is, what's next year going to be looking like at the county? Because there's real issues. But realistically speaking, that's budget, and it has the support from the people that represent all districts. We had the 11 votes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When does the final vote on accepting the budget come?
Right now. Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it could go either way, but technically it's tonight.
vote goes, it's either on or not. Yeah, yes, yes. I think we do it in 2 steps, don't we? If I remember right, do we do the levy separate from the actual
No,
acceptance?
you simply do the
As one. Different years, we've done that several different ways. Any other questions or you'd like to weigh in? Appreciate Lisa from Mind Being.
All right.
No, that's okay.
She distracted me.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
okay,
asked a
now.
question.
Oh, I don't have a question.
Yeah. Mr. White, when Lisa first came on, she was asking, she said, it's so overwhelming. And I said, well, there's one rule of thumb. When Mr. Rennie talks or Mr. Ward talks, listen.
I
No,
told him he's a great mentor for
Yeah.
me.
They know what they're talking about.
That
and
that
they
puts
listen
too
to
much
it.
pressure on any one person. One of the comments that you actually made a good point, Mr. Poirier, is the fact that it's a lot of information. And the fact that, yes, I do this for a living. I have 30 years of experience associated with that. But to the point, when you're bringing it forward, we need to speak to the level of the room, not above it. You speak above it, it gets weird, and you'll just vote stuff down that doesn't make sense. And the fact that that first couple of years, it was actually trying to support building the bridges back with the commission, so we're not adversarial. In that regard, if it isn't understood, how are we ever going to get the 11 votes to be able to pass anything? In that regard, is that passing it on to people that are new in this, I'll repeat the same thing, because I'm expecting the persons that actually pick up the torch next year, if I'm not here, or anybody, Mr. Rennie's not here next year, Alicia's not here next year. But it shouldn't be tied up in one person. It's the institutional knowledge to pass it on. That's key. Sheriff's been talking about it for 6 years. Your staff actually know these things because they're the expectation that's actually come up in the packets. We're copying a model that was first modeled by EMA, and now you guys have got that type of background. Why is it important? You know, those kind of key nuggets to just pass it on. It makes the process. It's not as overwhelming as it's made out to be, really. I'm sorry.
Are we ready to vote, or
Is there any more questions or comments, opinions, concerns? Commissioner Larry?
Thank you. Mr. Ward, thank you for speaking. What are your opinions on possibly looking at next year, the commission hiring a controller, like a financial controller?
You have one. You have a very capable person in Clarice.
No, I've heard that there's a little bit of a difference between a treasurer and a controller, so I'm just,
I would challenge that it's a title, Mr. Larry, in that
Okay.
regard, because one of the things that I would advocate for, and I just said it when we were talking before the meeting started, 3 years ago, there were things, we called them ghosts in the system. We couldn't rely on the reports that previous treasurer was giving us that were coming through the software. She's fixed them. Now we can at least believe the financial statements to be able to have a basis to, we're not dealing with those kind of anomalies in that regard. She's a very capable, smart woman that has actually fixed some of the content that was just troublesome to be able to educate people. I refer to it as the Mr. Titus clause. If he doesn't pass his sniff test, you're in trouble. Because nothing gets by them. You know, and Clarice actually passes that test. We didn't have any of those questions this year. So that's the testimony. Call it what you want. You have a control. You're a very capable person. Trust her to be able to do what needs to be done.
thank you.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
Team
great.
Clarice.
Are you getting paid for that speech?
No, not at all. Not at all. Recognize talent.
Ready to move
Forward
forward?
with the votes.
All in favor of accepting the budget, the 2022 budget, as returned to us from the Budget Committee with the expenditures, revenues, and the third page of the tax levy? Indicate by raising your hand, please. And opposed?
Respectfully opposed. I request the minutes reflect it's not a issue of disrespect to the Budget Committee, but I think we should have cut far more. Thank you.
Turn the page here, on to our next. We took care of the ARPA request. Thank you, Lisa, thank you. Amendment to the bylaws. This is the second vote on the amendment to the bylaws. Somebody who is a better parliamentarian than I, do they need to be read or just a second vote? Do they need to be read aloud again?
I think the motion needs to be made. I don't know if it needs to be.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
it needs to be read.
So a
as-
motion to receive the second vote on the amendment to the bylaws entitled, proposed amendment to the bylaws, items for meetings, section 14.
Second.
Point of order, Madam Chair. As on page, if you see section 40, to amend bylaws and rules, as required by the charter, the adoption, amendment, or repeal of a bylaw shall require a reading of two, parentheses, comma, parentheses, two formal board meetings, and the concurrence of the majority plus one vote of the full board. It does state reading. Thank you.
Okay. I have a volunteer that would like to read that since it's corrected for us.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
The bylaws, section 4, item for meetings, section 2 will now read, except as provided in this section, all agenda items must be approved by the chair for inclusion on the agenda. All commissioners may suggest items for future agendas during regular meetings at the time designated for that purpose and at other times. The chair may, in consultation with the county administrator, use his or her discretion in placing and scheduling items for the agenda. Any agenda item shall also be placed on the next meeting's agenda upon a vote of 4 or more board members. An item shall also be placed on the next meeting agenda if a commissioner submits a written request signed by 3 or more commissioners to the administrator on or before noon, 7 days before the day of any meeting. End.
Let's move to our second vote.
Madam Chair, discussion item, discussion. Thank you. I would ask, at the bottom, an item shall also be placed on the next meeting agenda if a commissioner submits a written request signed by 3 or more commissioners to the administrator. Is that stating, is that only 3, or is that meaning in addition to that commissioner, they must submit a signature, 3 other commissioners? In other words, 4 total signatures?
3.
3 total, okay. And I would make a motion that we leave the section provided the chair may not unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners. I make that motion.
Second. Could you repeat that, please? Like you to repeat the motion?
Sure. My motion is to leave the, to basically remove the stricken portion that's to keep this section in, provided the chair may not unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners. Madam Chair, I make a motion then to state, to leave all of that in there except to remove the not, and so it would state, provided the chair may unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners.
Line, I just want to.
It's the section that's in red, comma,
remove that
provided
word.
the chair may, and striking not, unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners.
Second to that motion. Seeing none?
Madam Chair? This is very concerning because what we're setting is a threshold now. Many times, sometimes you've seen things happening in executive session, for that matter, that I will not discuss, but things get revealed, information shows up, and sometimes it's, as Mr. Ward pointed out, it's not just one person, but sometimes a commissioner that may not be the one that speaks the most or is the most flashy winds up striking on an issue that's important, but they may try to bring that up, and if it is not the desire of the chair, they're at a significant disadvantage to get that information posted and brought up for a vote to actually be able to discuss it in any significant manner. We've seen that in the past. I requested multiple times to get things added to the agenda, and these bylaws have been violated by the chair in that regard, and they've never been brought to a vote. And this is dangerous. I will not question the intent. I have my frustrations with this, but this will serve to allow the chair to unreasonably delay placing items on an agenda, and it puts any commissioner that's trying to get an important issue dealt with, it places them at a severe disadvantage, and then it's going to put them in the position that they're supposed to be lobbying behind the scenes and sending a bunch of emails or texts, which are not allowed, in order to try to get issues addressed. This is a dangerous move, and I would just ask you to consider, any one of you, how would you like to be in the minority and try to get something done and have this ability? Because right now, there's protections. When you pass this as it's being presented to you, you're losing those protections. And this isn't partisan. This is just flat out. Sometimes you're going to see stuff that's a really bad idea. And this is irresponsible for this commission to go forward with this bylaw change. Thank you.
I'm not sure who was first here.
It provides a minority response for putting something on the agenda. And it doesn't require that you have 3 people that are going to vote for your issue. If you're all you have to do is convince two other commissioners that you'd like to debate something that's worth debating. It does not require a majority. I think it's very, very reasonable. This is an improvement over the minority commissioners, any minority commissioner's ability to get something on the agenda, even though they may or may not have 4 votes to pass something, but at least it'll get debated. And like I said, I'll oftentimes vote to place something on the agenda, even if I'm not going to vote for it. Just like I sign petitions that I may not vote for, because I know how hard it is to get those on the ballot.
For one thing, you know, as a rebuttal, the word unreasonable is totally subjective. What's unreasonable to you? You know, if somebody comes up and says, you know, I don't like that the county is tolerating so many red lights on Court Street. Well, excuse me, but the chair has authority to limit debate and to introduce items that are relevant to the work that we do. And that's all that this is saying. I don't think it's a restriction. I think it's a control. Otherwise, we would have a line coming out the door and you would have absolutely no power to say, no, I'm sorry, this is not an item that we deal with. No, I'm sorry, I have to limit your discussion, and you can limit by the bylaws discussion 5 minutes on an agenda item of anybody that talks. You can limit 10 minutes from the public from any other item that they may wish to bring up. So those are controls, and I feel that this is a very reasonable, objective control.
Also, because you've talked a couple times, so I want to give all other commissioners a chance to weigh in if they'd like to.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, a second. And I have not weighed in on this, and with your, well, I was just, I'm not going to vote on it where I'm the sitting chair and this affects my authority. I'd just like to say I'm going to just sort of bow out of this discussion and vote. Okay, the question has been called. All those in favor?
Of the question.
We're in favor of calling the question at this
Question,
point, not
yes.
voting on
Yes, in favor of calling the question.
bylaw.
And opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, so that passes to call the question. Let's, the question at hand is to accept the second reading of this bylaw change. All those in favor? Am I wrong on what I'm doing?
Just the second reading is the final.
Yep.
The final
Okay,
approval.
thank you. So let's add that then, second and final. Let me add that to my note. Those in favor? Opposed?
I'm opposed. I request the minutes to reflect the chair has violated this bylaw before it was changed. She has had ample opportunity, and it is well within the unreasonable definition when it's many, many weeks, if not months, in requests for an agenda item to be added, and she has failed to do so. Sally Christner, Chair, that is wrong. And you've taken away the rights of my constituents and the constituents of every member of Androscoggin County. I asked for this
Discussion
legal
items?
discussion, and you have kept it buried.
Discussion items?
Madam Chair?
Item?
Yes. I would urge the commission to reconsider their opposition to the injection mandates. And also, I would point out that, Madam Chair, you have violated people's rights under the charter and/or the bylaws, and you should be held accountable for that, keeping people from being able to speak with their faces shown if they wish to, or keeping them, or at least I'll retract that, but I'll say keeping them from being able to come to their own meeting. You should have frankly marched with Governor Mills in that parade instead of Governor LePage. Thank you.
future agenda, yes, go ahead.
To Larry Post. How are you doing on getting ready to discuss the agreements that we have with the towns that use the 911 call service? Are you going to be prepared for that, as I requested earlier?
I think you requested it 1st of January, we're hoping
Right,
to
but I
meet
just
that.
want to know if you're still on
We're,
target.
we haven't actually done that work yet, but that's,
You haven't forgotten me?
We haven't
Okay,
forgotten.
that's all I'm asking.
and actually the coordination or the coming together of the two facilities is actually not, that's still kind of out there in the air. So we're still not sure what's happening there as well.
But I just don't, I want to make sure we don't forget that subject.
Madam Chair, in regards to that communication center, that executive session, I believe, was illegally conducted. That's what I asked for considerations. Much of that has been stonewalled, mothballed, and used legal counsel against just to prevent that from ever seeing the light of day. We had legal counsel that said that we could consider that and open up that to the public, and it's been kept buried. That needs to be brought to the light of day. People need to know what went on in that executive session. We do have the authority to reveal it, and frankly, it was not revealed. It was not even entered in per the requirements of the FOA law. And that's speaking of the communication center meeting.